Hello. So I am here with Ryan Thomas. I'm really excited to be having this conversation. Him and I are working in very similar fields, and this is actually the first time that we're able to have a deeper conversation about the work that we do with men. So Ryan Thomas is an 11-year veteran turned sex and relationship coach for men. He's the co-founder and owner of The Intimate Lifestyle. So Ryan, tell me a little bit about how an 11-year veteran turned into a sex and relationship coach for men. Those two don't seem very connected.
You mean it's not a standard transition?
Not that I've seen, but who knows? I actually was not, I haven't been in the army, so I don't know what you guys do afterwards.
Yeah. It's just all hugs. That's all we do. We just hug it out. Yeah.
Couple ass slaps.
Couple ass slaps. A lot of ass slaps. A lot of them. Yeah. When I was in the army, there were a lot of things that sort of led up to where it is that I am now. I guess on an intimate level, I was dealing with a lot of anger and resentment towards women when I was younger, which it didn't start until I was in my early 20s. And I was just really looking for women's attention. Like I was really desperate for girls' approval. And then I started dabbling in the world of pickup artists, and which I'm sure you're aware of. And I think a lot of guys are aware of it. Mm-hmm. And that actually created a lot of anxiety, and it created a lot of anger and resentment towards women. So it actually caused more problems than it did, help me. So there was that. And then because of the anxiety that I had around women, I was dealing with sexual dysfunction, like premature ejaculation and erectile dysfunction. And then, so those are sort of the intimate components of my time when I was in the military. And then I guess on a personal side, I was just really, really angry, and I had applied to the JTF2, which is the Canadian version of the Navy SEALs, because I wanted to go and kill the bad guy. I wanted to go kill people. There was never a face, but it was always it was just like the faceless bad guy, and I wanted to go and destroy evil, basically.
I would love to hear a little bit more about what the transition was coming out of the army into working with men as you're doing, because you just opened up a really fascinating box of things that I would love to dive into, but I want to hear more of your story about that transition into the work that you're doing right now before I start drilling you with my own curiosities.
It's just short. Yeah, sure. Well, I guess I had to deal with the resentment and the anger and all this stuff that I had mentioned, and I guess we can get into that in a bit. After I got out of the army, I didn't know that I wanted to work with men. I actually just wanted to go traveling. I was a rock climber, so I wanted to go travel the world and just go climb. That's all I wanted to do. And so I got out and I went traveling through the States a tiny bit, and then I went to Australia and I worked as the milkman in Australia. I was actually doing door-to-door sales, selling dairy products.
Yeah. Did you get to use a lot of your pickup artist tactics?
You know what? I regret not using any of that stuff. I had two really good opportunities, and I just couldn't pull the trigger. Yeah, I kind of regret it. I regret it, to be honest. I was super professional from the army, and I had it ingrained in me, I need to be professional. I was just door-to-door sales guy selling freaking milk, and I was traveling. Looking back on it, I wish I could smack myself. What are you doing, Ryan?
Yeah, I think most men have a couple missed opportunities in terms of sexual conquests.
Definitely. So I went traveling through Australia a tiny bit, and then I came back to Canada. I realized that I did want to be here in Canada, and I moved out to Vancouver, and I started working in finance. And when I was starting to work in finance, I realized that I started to realize that I wanted to work with men, and I wanted to work with men in something having to do with sexuality, but I didn't know what it was. So I ran a workshop, had 4 guys come to it, and then I started running some more workshops, and a full year later, I launched The Intimate Lifestyle, and the idea was just to help men develop a sort of sexual mastery and emotional self-mastery, so that way they could show up in their relationships, get the kind of partner that they want, get the kind of relationship that they want, and get just more trust, respect, and appreciation, and just feel confident in who they are sexually and emotionally in relationships, and just be able to navigate that territory.
That's beautiful. You got a really interesting story, and there are some similarities to my own. I also first started stepping into some sort of leadership role in the financial industry back when I was 19. And that catalyzed a big spiritual awakening for me. And that launched me onto my particular trajectory. And I also have a similarity with you in regards to sexual trauma. And that's perhaps like one of the first questions that I want to go into with you, because this is a topic that is taboo for a lot of men, but it is almost as prevalent in men as it is with women. And so my first question about this is that related to some sort of trauma that you went through as a child, or was that specific to your experience that you were going through in the army and actually attempting to activate sexual encounters with women, kind of like seeping into your consciousness and kind of distorting your ability to perform, so to speak?
Yeah, I think it was more of just distorting my ability to perform, because I was so caught up with my need to prove myself to the women that I was attracted to. So if I was around a woman that I didn't really find all that attractive up until a certain point, well, you know what, the erectile dysfunction was a separate issue that popped up much later on in my journey. Premature ejaculation was something that showed up also a little bit later on in my journey, which was, it was interesting actually, because when I was younger, when I first started having sex, it wasn't really an issue. And then once I started, I guess, moving into new cities, you know, being posted into new cities and having to meet new people and feeling really lonely, a lot of my insecurities around women really started to show up, especially when I started playing with the pickup artist stuff, wanting to get that validation. And then that created a lot more anxiety. That brought up the traumas that I had when I was younger. And then that created the premature ejaculation.
Right.
And then later on, there was a depression that I went into, and that created erectile dysfunction. And then that created performance anxiety, which would then give me erectile dysfunction, even though I wasn't still in a depression.
Right. Yeah, I can definitely relate to a lot of what you're saying. I'm curious how you actually took these experiences and actually transitioned into coaching other men. Like, what is it that equipped you to be able to lead men through workshops and structured processes? Because it doesn't sound like you actually went through any type of formal training beyond just your own experiences of, you know, being challenged with women and connection and relationship in a few different ways.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when it comes to formal education, I don't have it. I'll be the first one to admit that. When I was in 2009, I became a certified and registered hypnotherapist and became trained in NLP. So I started using that, and I had a few clients, but then I stopped bringing in clients because I realized that I had a whole bunch of stuff that I had to deal with. So I started using those techniques and the stuff that I had learned and went inwards. So I guess the question is, what makes me equipped? Is that
what is it that actually equipped you and inspired you to work with men in the way that you're doing? You just kind of like transitioned from finance into having this realization that you wanted to work with men. I'm just trying to connect the dots here as to
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, sure. So I started diving into a lot of Tantra. And so I started experiencing non-ejaculatory orgasms, and the premature ejaculation, I was able to transition that and turn away from that, and turn away from a lot of the anxiety to feeling completely comfortable in my skin in the bedroom. I started taking a lot of one-on-one coaching, group therapy, group workshops, a lot of Tantra training, Tantra exploration, and started experiencing, non-ejaculatory orgasms. And I knew where that was coming from for me. And what I wanted to do was help men transition away from that same sort of anger, the same kind of resentment and anxiety. So I knew what it was that I had done, and I wanted to help guys go through that same process of healing. Same sort of idea when it comes to erectile dysfunction. And the majority of it came down to my internal state, less so physical. It wasn't really all that much physical. It was mostly mental and emotional that was causing these erectile dysfunction issues. No longer was dealing with it, and I wanted to start helping guys go through the same healing process that I did.
I see. So have you found in your work with men that a lot of the times issues such as anger or resentment or anxiety are directly linked to their satisfaction with sex and relationship?
Yes. Yeah. At least when it comes to sexual dysfunction, I think I don't necessarily know if anger, but definitely some resentment can kick in. I've found that there's definitely anxiety and resentment, at least for me, tended to be quite interrelated. I'd feel anxious around wanting to perform. I wouldn't necessarily perform. I wouldn't really get the approval. And then that would create some resentment. And I couldn't look at myself and say, I'm an idiot. Instead, I would blame them. And then if I was being anxious, then I wouldn't get the attention from women that I wanted, then I would feel resentful because what? You don't see how good I am. You don't see that I'm a good person here. So it would create resentment. And then if I did get the attention, the resentment switched to anxiety. So there was sort of like this flip flop back and forth between anger and resentment, and then anxiety. Wow, you actually do like me and I really want your approval. Oh shit. Oh, you don't like me? What the hell is your problem? Like you're a jerk. You don't like me. You don't see how good I am. Flip flopping back and forth. Yeah. So I would say that the majority of my journey it's been predominantly like it has been a personal journey, like of personal healing. So that's what I work with guys on. So in the context of relationships, I predominantly work with guys in shining a light on their shadow, on the evil in their hearts, which ties back to the military. Being able to shed a light on that, because if we don't look at our shadow, if we can't embrace and integrate our dark side and our shadow, then it's going to show up in really unhealthy ways, which is what I had recognized when I started doing the NLP work.
Yeah, definitely. I can resonate with a lot of what you're describing right now. One of the reasons why I'm interested in having these conversations in such an open fashion is to shed more light on some of the universal issues, the societal issues that a lot of men are going through, because I don't feel there's a really huge platform in the public sphere where men can just share honestly and vulnerably about the things that they're actually being challenged by. So I'm curious what it is that draws men to work with you, like the potential clients who reach out to speak with you. How do they approach you? What do they describe as being their issues, and how do you activate that willingness in other men to actually admit to having a challenge with something, especially something so intimate as sexuality and relationship, where so much of our self-worth is encoded in?
Yeah, big time. So it seems like there were two questions in there. There's one, like, how do we get guys to admit that they need help? And then the other is, what do the guys who come to me are dealing with?
Yeah.
There were sort of two things that were in there. So the guys that have come to talk to me, I'd say pretty much all of them are dealing with resentment towards women, or their partners. And then that's showing up as a lot of anxiety. So they're not showing up fully in their relationships. They feel that they're really scared that they're going to lose their partner. They're really scared that they're going to push them away. So their emotional outbursts, or they're just shutting down, being really snappy, just don't have any control over their emotions, and they can sense that they're going to push their partner away and they don't want to. This was actually a term when I did a survey of previous clients and quite a few guys. The line was, I don't feel like a man in my relationship. In other areas of their life, they'll feel like a man, but not necessarily in their relationship. Yeah. So there's that. And then the performance anxiety is something that comes up. I'd say half my clients have been dealing with performance anxiety. So just some sexual shame. And then the other guy is just not feeling like they're stepping fully into their power as a man. And then that just shows up as resentment towards women.
And they just come right out and declare this to you?
Some of the guys, I have to tease it out. So I have to say, well, it's you're just resentful. Like there's resentment. There's expectations that you have around women. So they're carrying these covert contracts around their partners or potential partners or their desired partners. And then when those contracts aren't met, then they feel angry. So I have to shine a light onto that. I'd say usually the guys, so a couple of guys are like, no, I'm just single and I'm really fed up with being, can I swear on this? Can I swear?
Yeah. You can
okay. Yeah. I was about to, and I was like, Maybe I should. Okay.
Control that anger.
Center it. Woosa.
Breathe.
Couple guys have said I'm really fucking pissed off because I don't have the sex life that I want. I'm still single, and I don't fucking like that. So for those guys, they've just come out and said it. The guys who are in relationships, they're like, yeah, my partner's just like, we're just constantly arguing all the time, and I hate it. Like, I don't want to feel like this all the time. Like, our sex life has gone to shit, and I don't know what to do. Like, we're just arguing. I'm trying to get her to listen. I just don't get what's going on. We're just constantly at each other's throats. And I just want to have a good sex life. Like, I just want to have some sex, and then I'll say this one thing, or I'll give her a compliment, and then she snaps at me. Like, I don't know what the hell's going on. So those have been the two ways that guys have come to me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I feel like a lot of the men that I work with are either struggling from one of two things. It's either overregulation of their emotions, meaning they've become numb. They're not even aware of what it is that they're feeling, or they're finding themselves to be hypersensitive, but the only emotions that they are allowed to express are anger
and horniness.
Yeah, some sort of dominant emotion, but anything that represents something vulnerable, like crying or confusion or empathy or compassion, carries with it this mysterious quality of being emasculating.
To that's basically it. So the guys that have come, they're usually they lash out with their anger so that it's not controlled, and they don't like that, and they can see it in the relationship. Or some guys they're just too nice.
Yeah. So this kind of brings a spontaneous question to mind here. If archetypally masculine emotional expressions are something like anger or horniness or aggression or irritation, things that are being expressed in these relationships, why do you think it is that these men who are struggling in their relationships don't feel like a man? What does it mean to be an empowered man if they are expressing the things that stereotypically identify masculine qualities? What are they looking for exactly?
Oh, that is a good question. Say it again.
So if these men are embodying and expressing stereotypical masculinity, but the main problem they're struggling with is that they don't feel like a man in their relationships, what is it that they're looking for?
Respect. It's respect and appreciation from their partners. And they think that they're being strong, but really they're just lashing out. And yeah, that's
okay.
it. I would say it's definitely respect. So they're feeling disrespected, and they don't know how to handle it. They don't know why they're being disrespected. I'm doing all this work around the house. Like, I'm doing these renovations. Like, why I'm doing all this for you? Like, why? Like, what the hell is the problem? That's been a couple guys where they're doing all this extra work, but they don't seem to be appreciated or respected.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'll lash out because it gets bottled up, and then they freak out and they lash out at their partner. And then they don't know how to, they don't understand, like you said, they don't understand the emotions of what's happening in there. They don't understand the actual hurt, and they don't know how to communicate what's going on here. They don't understand how to communicate, hey, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. Like, I'm really trying to help here. They don't know how to have these conversations. That just builds up, and they explode, and then it creates, at that point, it's just damage control and repairing the relationship rather than communicating about it.
Right. I see. So somewhere there's a disconnect between how they have been taught or programmed to express masculinity and what is actually giving them that sense of respect and appreciation, which is ultimately feeding their sense of being a man in their relationship and in the world as a whole. So I'm curious as to what that disconnect is and how to repair it. Like, where is the the difference point in how we've been trained to behave as men and how we actually accomplish what it is that we are seeking in a relationship, which is this respect and appreciation.
I see. Yeah, that's a good question. Another thing in there is a sense of power, able to have some kind of sense of power in their life.
Right.
A lot of the guys that come to talk to me feel that they've lost that sense of power in their relationships, and not necessarily a power over their partner, but a power over themselves, their sexuality, being able to lead and get respect from their partners. So it's that sense of power that's lost. So I guess, how do we reconcile those two? I would definitely say that a lot of it has to do with, first of all, understanding their anger, being able to actually like look at it. So for the guys who lash out, they instantly switch into shame and they feel terrible for lashing out. At least those are guys that I work with. It's either that or the guys just repress their anger entirely and then always be nice, but then it just turns into the seed of resentment, then turns towards themselves, and they just like angry all the time, and then it just bleeds out into the relationships, and they push people away, which then creates more distance, which creates more disconnection, which creates more resentment, which creates more distance. It's this self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I would say it really comes down to being honest with ourselves about our anger, about our desires, about what we like, about what we don't like, and being able to just say it out loud, even if it's not to our partners, but saying it out loud. For example, I had a client on the weekend, and he said that his partner that he and his partner had a huge argument because his partner could sense, was asking him, "Hey, what do you like sexually? What do you want?" And he said, "Oh, I don't know. It's okay." And she could sense that he wasn't really showing up and that he wasn't really saying what he wanted. She could feel it. And she wanted him to say what he wants. She wants that from him, but he wasn't willing to do it. So it created a big argument, and they feel that their sex life is starting to get boring. So when we were talking, I said, "Okay, well, do you have things that you want to share with her?" And he said, "Yes. I mean, there are things that I definitely think of that I do want to try. Absolutely." Like, "Okay, have you ever talked to her about it before? Have you ever told her?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Okay, would you feel comfortable telling me?" "No." "Okay. Have you ever said these things out loud before?" "No." "Okay. So your partner's gone, right?" He said, "Yes." "Okay. I want you to turn off the video, put the mic onto mute, and I want you to take as much time as you need and say these fantasies, say these things out loud, own them, accept it. This is who you are. This is a part of who you are. If you try to ignore it, it's just you can't ignore it. You can't. It's gonna come out one way or the other. So say it out loud, and then when you've finished saying that, turn the mic back on, turn the video back on, and then let's talk about what came up for you when you did that." So he did that, came back about 5 minutes later, and he was visibly not shaken, but he's normally pretty confident and very direct, and he's a very strong guy. And when he came back, his arms were crossed, his legs were crossed, and he looked pretty uncomfortable and pretty raw. And no one heard him. But just the act of him saying these things out loud was extremely challenging for him. And the only reason why he committed to saying these things out loud and doing this was because he knew that if I don't say these things, if I don't do this, if I don't deal with this, it's going to negatively impact my relationship. It's already having a negative impact on my relationship. So I have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there was a fear of like, okay, well, if I bring these things out and if I say them, first of all, if I say them out loud, well, then they're real. If I say it to you, then it's real. And then if I say it to my partner, then maybe it's going to drive a wedge between us. Maybe she's going to hate me. Maybe she's going to think I'm disgusting. Maybe she's going to think I disrespect her, and I don't want to disrespect her. So I'm really scared of saying these things because of the potential fallout. Okay, so you have two options. you allow your relationship to maybe fall apart because you don't communicate these things when she's asking you to show up fully as who you are and what you want. Or you can embrace the aspects of who you are, your desires, your wants, your fears, and embrace these things, integrate that into who you are, and then talk to your partner about it. She doesn't have to participate if she doesn't want to. It's up to you to say what it is that you want and embrace who you are and communicate that with her, and then come together as a couple and find a way that you can relate. It's the point of a relationship, to relate.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of guys end up repressing the desires, and when they feel upset or hurt or taken advantage of or disrespected, or that their needs aren't being met sexually, they get really upset, and they don't want to, first of all, communicate it because they don't want to push their partner away because they're scared of the conflict. And second of all, they don't even want to admit these things to themselves. And then that creates resentment and frustration that they feel inside themselves. And because they're not looking at it, they don't know where this frustration and anxiety is coming from. So they just vomit it onto their partners. It's kind of a long-winded response, but I wanted to include that example because I think that sort of encompasses, like, I think that answers your question in the best way that I can. It's being honest with ourselves about what it is that we want and being able to communicate it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really great answer, and it sounds really, really simple when you lay it out like that. All we need to do is speak our truth. And my initial response is, well, why aren't we doing that all the time? Like, why is it such a big problem for so many men to do that?
Yeah. Expectations. That's what it would be, is expectations of, I'm supposed to be this one thing. I'm supposed to be this kind of guy. This is who I am. This is who I am. This is me. And if they like something else, then that contradicts who they think that they are. So there's challenges that way. Admitting that we need something or want something can be really vulnerable too.
Yeah. So
we can open ourselves up. And I'm having an example come in. Some guys, a client of mine, I don't think he's brought this up to his partner. He's also a long-time friend, and he has gone to sex workers for leather. It's for, like, not like a dominatrix, but it's mostly for just leather play. Mm-hmm. And there's just a fear around what people would think of. He's got a fear around what people would think of him if they found out. Mm-hmm. So I think that fear of judgment is a big thing of why a lot of guys don't share what it is that they want and what their boundaries are. Mm-hmm. And there's also this idea of, like, well, I'm the protector, I'm the provider. If I ask for something, then that means I'm no longer the protector and the provider, so I'm no longer in that position of power. So They don't want to give that up and be like, you know what, I need some help here. I'm being a bit vulnerable. They don't want to do that because there's fear in giving away some of that power. Yeah.
Yeah. I love diving into this. And I'm curious, do you work with women as well, or do you work exclusively with men?
I work exclusively with men, but I've worked with I've worked with female friends, and they ask me to work more, but I've generally just, I work with men.
Have you ever been called to work with women? Why don't you work with women? Because this sounds like it's a relational effort, right?
You know, the more clients I've been taking on, the more I've been thinking that maybe I will at some point. I think the reason why I want to work with men mostly, and why I have just been working with men, is because I saw, like, the struggles that I went through, and I didn't really feel like I had a solid support network. And a lot of guys that I see, there's some men's work that's out there, and I've seen some men's work that is a little too woo-woo. It's a little too soft. And when I was in the Army, if I had seen some guys talking about spirituality and energy and flow and stuff like that, I turned a blind. I was like, that's fucking weird. You guys are weird. What are you doing? And then because I was forced into Tantra because of my sexual dysfunction, I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, and then I started feeling some energy in my body. I'm like, whoa, whoa, oh, holy shit. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Let's see what's going on here. Okay.
That's called karma.
Yeah, I think so, man. So I think there can be a fear around men's work, around being emotionally aware, and doing emotional work with men can be. I've seen it to be a bit too soft, and I wanted to bring the awareness that you don't have to be soft to be emotionally aware and emotionally in touch.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's kind of why I've wanted to work mostly with men, is because I want to reach the guys who were like me, who would have been like, this stuff is fucking weird. I mean, I got these problems. I don't like dealing with this. I don't like dealing with women that are treating me like crap. I don't want to deal with sexual dysfunction. I don't want to have these arguments all the time with my partner. Okay. Like, I didn't want to do a bunch of spiritual work. So yeah, I think I'm rambling a tiny bit here. I think it's because I just wanted to bring a bit more spine to the men's work. So men's work can target the heart, and like, oh, guys are too angry. They need to target their softer emotions and be okay to be vulnerable. But I think that pendulum can swing a little bit too far. So I try to bring a balance between the spine and the heart. Having a bit of that hardness, which comes from my army background and just also my nature, and then also bring that heart and the ability to connect with our softer emotions. Does that better answer the question?
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. In a lot of my exposure to men's work, I found the same, that it tended to fall into one of two categories, either like the warrior retreat, where it's all like no pain, no gain, kind of like declare your passion and make a claim and pierce through resistance and rites of passage and all that stuff. And then the other side of the spectrum is almost like feminizing men and oftentimes those programs are actually created and held by women. Actually, like women coaching men as to how to soften. And it's very rare that I found a practitioner who works exclusively with men is dedicated to actually harmonizing and balancing those qualities. And I just wanted to unpack a little bit of what you're saying, because we're in a really interesting societal landscape right now where the rise of the feminine is very much at the forefront of our culture. And you can see this everywhere, over the news or social media, in relationship. And effectively what I'm seeing is that in women as individuals, but also in relationship, there's this desire, this longing to reclaim their sense of sovereignty, their sense of personal power, which in essence is embodying more stereotypically masculine qualities, of control and power and being able to take care of themselves and make decisions and being respected as an authority, as someone who's capable and effective and focused and all of these things. And what is being asked of men in relationship, and I've been exposed to this both myself personally and in men that I'm working with, is a desire for them to actually embody and express these more feminine qualities, which vicariously results in some sort of relinquishing of, let's say, like a sense of authority in the relationship in a certain regard. And so like embodying these more feminine qualities of feeling intelligence, of sensitivity, of softness, without falling into being completely feminized in the sense that a person becomes passive and actually loses touch with their masculine power, seems like a really delicate operation in the view of the larger social spectrum that we're present in right now. And this is connected to the question of why you don't work with women, because it seems like they're so interconnected that the work that men are doing requires some sort of understanding and support from the feminine, as well as vice versa. The work that women are doing requires a degree of understanding and support from the masculine to be able to actually empower that work to fully take root.
Yeah, you know what? There was so much there. I think I mean, I've got my limitations, right? So I feel most, there were two things that I was saying. I feel most capable to work with men and not quite ready to work with women. So if I did work with women, it would be more along the lines of helping them understand maybe where guys are coming from. When I do work with guys and it's talking about women, I can help shed some light on where their partners are coming from and where the feminine is coming from and where these guys are maybe being a bit too feminine, not holding enough of a masculine frame. But yeah, you know what? I think it's a bit of readiness and not knowing if I'm quite there just yet. Maybe I am, and maybe I'm just underestimating myself. But I find more passion working with guys, and I want to make sure that I'm focused on working with guys. That's where I want to put my attention. I don't want to split my attention. In the future, I will. But yeah, you're definitely right, though. It is interrelational, and we do need to work together. And I think that's why we definitely need a lot more women's coaches as well. I mean, there's tons. There's definitely a lot more women's coaches than there are men's coaches. Yeah.
So how do we go about training ourselves and other men that something like emotional intelligence or sensitivity or vulnerability is something that will actually empower them in their lives rather than devalue them?
Say that again.
How do we go about training ourselves and other men in our culture that developing the capacity to be vulnerable, to be emotionally expressive, is something that will empower our lives rather than devalue our status as men?
I think it has to show there needs to be demonstration of how vulnerability can actually bring you closer to what it is that you want, and how the anger, if you stay just purely stoic or just allow yourself just to feel anger, demonstrate and just bring the awareness of how those things tear us down and actually create disconnection and allow ourselves. So I think because it really does come down to leadership by example. So if I can allow myself to feel those softer emotions, and let's say I'm in a workshop and I am able to show some softer emotions, but I still maintain a solid frame and I don't necessarily lose respect or soften myself to the point where I'm supplicating to my students or other people, I think that could show guys how being a bit softer or allowing yourself to feel those emotions doesn't reduce your strength, but actually can actually increase strength and trust and intimacy. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure if I'm answering it.
Yeah, that there has to be demonstrations. There has to be example present for another person to actually see that it's possible and that is the consequence of some sort of empowered vulnerability.
Exactly. Because basically when we feel the vulnerability, there's a level of trust. So if you imagine like you've got this power and then there's a drop in the power when you feel that vulnerability. And a lot of guys feel that drop and they feel, oh, I've lost power. Now I'm not going to have any respect anymore. And there needs to be that trust that, you know what, the people that I'm showing this vulnerability to are going to handle it well, and that I'm not going to lose respect. They're actually going to show care and not look down on me for the rest of my life, but they're going to see that I'm human and recognize, okay, here's a place of his development. Here's how we can support him, whatever it might be. Maybe it's owning up to a mistake that you've made, right? There can be a lot of vulnerability in there. Own up to a mistake. Oh shit, I fucked up. I'm so sorry. There's a lot of vulnerability in that. So there has to be trust that things are going to work out. And a lot of guys run away from this because they don't know, they feel the fall and they're like, oh my God, it's never going to stop. But it does eventually stop. And then what happens is it actually goes up even higher and you create even deeper intimacy as a result of that, and even deeper trust. They trust your character because you owned up to a mistake. They trust your character because you showed some of your humanness, your sadness, your guilt, your shame. You didn't dwell in it, That's where the weakness comes in, is when you dwell in your anxiety, you dwell in your insecurity, you dwell in the sadness. That's where people lose respect. But if you feel it and then you bounce back, there's a lot of strength in that. People trust that character. So I like it. I use this example for the military. So in the military, we'd go on exercise and we'd go for training, and you'd see people at their absolute worst. You'd see grown men crying, just like sunstroke, heat stroke. They're just like all over the place. Just in the worst shape. And then when you're done the training, you come back out, you've got a meal, you've drank a ton of water, you're feeling good, you've had a shower, you go out, you get food, you get a beer or two or 7. and then you bond as a result of going through that really fucking challenging shit, right? You go through the shit together, you're forced to go through the shit together, and then you come out the other end and you're back to where you are, you're back to who you are, and then you're able to reconnect and say, man, that really sucked, eh? Damn.
Hey, cheers.
Yeah, that's it, man. That's it. And then you're like, okay, you know what? I had they know that you had their back. And I know, you know what, when I fell there and I lost that magazine and, sort of screwed up some of our defensive position for a few seconds or whatever, I'm coming up with random examples. That didn't happen. I know that they've got my back.
Right.
They've got my back. I've got their back. Actually, this is one example. It was on a defensive exercise, and a buddy of mine told me to go and, Ryan, just go rest your eyes for a bit. We've got the trench right here. I'm like, okay. And I go and I lay down, and I hadn't slept in about three or 4 days. Actually, yeah, this was coming into the 4th day, and we had to dig a whole bunch of trenches. And I don't really remember this vaguely, but I crab walked. Crab walk is when you know what crab walking is, right? And I crab walked over to my buddy who's in the trench. So all I can see is just his shoulder and his head. And I start tapping him with my foot. He's like, Ryan, what are you doing? It's like, hey. I don't really remember this all this much. So I'm just going off of the memory of him telling me this. And he said to me, Ryan, yeah, go back to sleep. Okay. And I crab walked backwards and I lay back down, just completely out of it. And we had a big laugh about it later. And it's because I knew that my buddies had my back and they know that I had their back. So we can go into this tough scenario knowing that, hey, it's all good. I've got your back.
Yeah.
So in friendship or in relationship, if I have to show some of that vulnerability, it's the same way as going onto the exercise. You're going to be really raw and vulnerable and in a vulnerable position. And it comes down to trust that this person, my partner, has my back, and they're not going to think less of me because I showed some of my humanness. And then come out of that vulnerability and boom, it's like, holy shit, you had my back. Fuck yeah, let's do this. Really deepens that intimacy. That's why in the military, there's so much camaraderie, because we go through hell together and then we come out and it strengthens the bond. So that challenge of exercise or whatever the challenge is the same thing with an emotional challenge inside of a relationship. We can use that conflict. We can use that vulnerability as a means to really deepen that intimacy in our relationship. But we have to be willing to go into it, not think that that's an indication of our character, but rather just an aspect of who we are that we need to shed a light on and use it to deepen that intimacy and that trust and that respect in the relationship.
Yeah, I imagine that's why it's so attractive for a lot of men to join the army or engage in other different like warriorship rites of passage sort of thing, because there's a part of us that knows that that kind of intensity is necessary. But it took me a long time to actually make the link between the kind of risk that you're describing right now in relationship with something that would actually create the type of bonding and the type of growth that I was seeking. Like, I find that it's a lot easier for me to go out and engage in something like 4 dips in an ice bath, with a group of guys until you get into like numbness, and actually just breaking through that physical threshold of challenge. It's easier to approach that than it is to like express a sexual desire that you don't know how it's going to be received, as an example.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the difference between the masculine and the feminine. The masculine is about challenge and emptiness. So we reach a challenge and then there's sort of an emptiness. Hey, we've accomplished this challenge, and then you can sort of relax. Are you familiar with the masculine like David stuff? Are you familiar?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Are most of your listeners familiar with it as well? Am I using their language?
Maybe give a brief rundown of it. Yeah.
Okay. So the masculine is about emptiness or death. It's about overcoming challenge. So if you imagine, I'll use this as an example. In sex, man reaches orgasm, ejaculates, and then there's emptiness. There's no more tension. Or a guy will jerk off, have an orgasm, ejaculation, and then there's no more tension. So the masculine is about that emptiness of tension. We don't like feeling that tension. So when there's a challenge, we want that challenge, we overcome that challenge, and then there's no more tension because there's no more challenge. So that's where the masculine, that's kind of the masculine. The feminine is all about feeling. It's about flow. It's about life. So if you imagine masculine is about death, not in the sense of no life, but just emptiness and just awareness, witnessing. And then the feminine is about feeling. It's about life. It's about emotions. So if a man is feeling a lot of emotions, he's actually in his feminine. Mm-hmm. So when we're feeling a lot of that vulnerability and we're opening up to our partners about a sexual desire, we're actually in our feminine, which feels kind of uncomfortable if we tend to be a bit more of a masculine man, because we don't understand how to handle our feminine side. So that's why it can be so challenging for us. But the feminine thrives on that. A feminine woman doesn't want to be with a man who's constantly in his feminine, but she wants to know that he's at least aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what's the goal here? What's the ultimate goal? Like, what is your vision of empowered masculinity that you're working towards in the work that you do with men?
So my mission is still to destroy evil, which was my, I know it sounds kind of silly, but when I was in the military, I wanted to go kill people. Like I saw evil, bad people. I wanted to go shoot them in the face. I wanted to kill bad guys, bad people. I realized that if I did that, I would become the very thing that I was trying to destroy. I'd have to become death. I'd have to become destruction. Does it make sense for me to add more of what it is that I don't want to see, or does it make sense for me to add more of what I do want to see? And what I do want to see is connection, intimacy, and understanding and compassion. So I left the military, and that's a very brief explanation of that journey out of away from the JTF too. So, my mission, right? So leading towards my mission is still to destroy evil. I'm still a warrior, but it's not through outward destruction. It's by shining a light on the evil that resides in our own hearts, and to turn people away from anger, hatred, resentment, and turn them towards intimacy, understanding, and connection. So that is my mission. So I guess my goal for men is to help men become fully expressed in who they are, to be able to not turn away from the parts of themselves that they hate, but be able to look at every aspect of who they are, the parts of themselves that they love and the parts of themselves that they hate, and remove the charge that they hold towards the things that they dislike, so that way they can embrace it and be able to ask for what it is that they need. Because generally the parts of ourselves that we don't like, there's a goal behind them. There's a purpose. There's a purpose there. It's trying to give you something. So look at it, understand what your anger is there for, your sadness or your guilt or your shame. What's the purpose behind it? Look at it and then be like, oh, you're trying to give me protection. You're trying to give me, protection is usually just a big one. I'm drawing a blank right now, but you're trying to give me something. Oh, okay. Well, me pushing all of the people that I love away doesn't give me safety. It might give me safety, but it actually creates more pain because I want connection. So me cheating on all of my partners pushes them away. Well, that's actually hurting me more. I'm doing it because I want to stay safe because being close is really hard for me. Okay, so that's the purpose behind it, when really ultimately I do want love. Okay. You know, I'm struggling right now because I was trying to come up with a specific example and I talked myself into a corner.
I could feel it. I just wanted to see if you could talk your way out of it.
I know. I was trying to, man. I was trying to come up with a specific example. I was drawing a blank.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it again. If we look at the dark sides, the dark aspects of our character, they all have a purpose behind them. Look at it, understand its purpose, and then you can learn a new behavior to accomplish that particular goal.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm being really angry all the time and lashing out, it's because I want respect. Okay, well, lashing out pushes people away. What's another way that I can behave that will get the respect that I feel that I deserve?
So in essence, your goal is nothing short of self-mastery.
That's basically it. Not necessarily communication mastery and coming up with examples on the spot. But clearly, I'm still working on that.
Yeah, well, you embody it, so you get a pass.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thanks. I'm kind of embarrassed. That was actually pretty bad. That was pretty brutal.
That was perfect. You're a great demonstration of being empowered in your vulnerability.
Oh, yeah, definitely vulnerable there.
Yeah, this is fascinating to me because essentially what you're saying is the work that you're doing is really just helping people be authentic. And all the problems and the challenges that we go through in life is the result of us not communicating something that is important to us at the time when it's important to us. And like what fascinates me is the forces that create these blockages and the societal structures that actually perpetuate these blockages on an individual level. Because, I mean, we're speaking very conceptually. You've given a lot of examples of how these issues show up and how the results show up. I'm curious to hear some of the practical applications beyond just, or in addition to, sharing something that might be scary for a person to share. Because in my work with men and with myself, like I experienced significant sexual trauma when I was growing up. And it created these neurological connections between a biological fear response, like a fight or flight response, and that connected itself with arousal in really powerful ways. So it wasn't as simple as just voicing something in the moment, because my entire neurobiological system was activated in this fight or flight state, which inhibited my capacity to think and respond in a certain way. All of my impulses were get out of there, escape, shut down, or push away. And it took a lot of time to even develop the capacity to communicate anything when I was in that state. You know, being bullied and being emotionally shut down was so deeply imprinted in my nervous system that it was impossible for me to cry for over 10 years. Anytime a tear would start forming and I was feeling sadness, my body would respond by sneezing. It had like this immediate biological response that would immediately shut down that expression of what I was actually feeling. And so there were these very real biological, neurological blockages to applying something as simply put as expressing what it is that you care about or what it is that's important to you. And it may be a little more challenging for some men than just, you know, voicing something that they haven't voiced in the past. So I'm curious to hear about any practical steps you might have for a person who has these very real barriers between themselves and expressing something that carries really deeply embedded fear responses that have proven, like those behaviors have proven in some way, shape, or form in a person's experience to be threatening. So how can we actually take the first steps to embodying the kind of authenticity that you're envisioning, the liberated human being who doesn't have any more of these blockages? How do we take the first steps?
I would definitely say the first step is being able to label what's happening, being able to recognize a pattern. So for example, a client just recognized this pattern just recently that whenever fear shows up, he turns sexual. And that had shown up a couple of times when I had said something that scared him or presented something that scared him, he would turn it sexual. And he had that realization just the other day, and it was great. And he's like, whoa, whenever things get scary, whenever I have this big fear, I instantly start thinking sexual thoughts about someone else or about you. And that was a great revelation. So at that point, he's able to start making some changes. So I would say, if you're noticing these results, that like whatever results you're having in your life, what's the trigger moment where everything starts to change? Things are going well. Boom, shit got real bad real quick, and then oh crap. So I'm going to use a particular example. There was a study about rat poison, and they determined that if you gave rat poison to rats, and they died right away, the rats learned, don't eat that stuff, it's dangerous. They learned it relatively quickly. But if the rat poison, the rats ate it, they died 2 days later. The rats weren't able to learn that, oh, it's that particular poison that's dangerous, because they couldn't associate the death of their fellow rat with that poison. So what can happen with our patterns is we get a certain, things are fine, there's a trigger moment, things are changing, a lot of tension, anger, things get destroyed, and then days, weeks, months go by, and it's like, well, what the hell happened? So it's about bringing, in the same way of the rat, like where's the poisonous part that catalyzed the breakdown of everything else. So being able to come back and be aware of like, okay, well, what's this pattern? Like, where do things start to go wrong? Once you see that point, you can label it and be like, okay, that right there is the point, and then start to work with that. So that's the first thing, being able to label it. Then the next practical step, I would say the practical step is going for therapy, going for counseling, going for coaching. What that stuff will do is help you intellectualize it. It'll help you understand what's happening and how you can learn new behaviors, right? Because you can't learn what you don't know. It's a lot harder to figure things out on your own. It's a lot easier to have people give you hints and give you tips and tricks and learn new ways of behaving that way. Mm-hmm. So dealing with the mental aspect of it, and then dealing with the emotional aspect of it, because you can have new beliefs, but in your body, it still causes pain. Mm-hmm. So I think that depends on what the struggle is. But I would say the first step to dealing with the emotional aspect of it. So once you've labeled it, let's say you've got some new beliefs and you realize what's happening, being able to feel those emotions. Don't run away. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to think your way out of it. We're feeling beings. Allow yourself to feel it. I think a lot of people start to identify too much with their emotions. So they think, oh, if I'm anxious, then I'm just an anxious person, and I don't want to be an anxious person. So I push that away. Or if I'm an anxious person, people are going to think that I'm an idiot and that I'm a weirdo. I'm not a weirdo. I don't want to do this. And then they just kind of run away. They turn away from it. So recognize that you're not your emotions. Your anger, your sadness, your joy, your happiness, your horniness, you're all of these things. Which means that if you're all of these things, it ultimately means that you're none of them. Because if you're one thing, if you're happiness, if you're just pure happiness, then you can't be sadness. You can't be horniness. You can't be anger. You can't be these other things, because you are happiness. But you are all of these things. So you're not happy. You're not sad. So it's important to recognize that your feelings are simply just a feeling. It's not who you are. So do your best to not identify with your experience in the moment, or in the experience of what it is that's happening that's bringing up this emotion or this triggered moment. So allow yourself to feel it. Don't turn away, no matter how much it hurts. So that's the first thing. Allow yourself to feel it. And then there's different modalities that you can do to release those emotions. Sometimes there's scream therapy. Sometimes it's anger therapy. Sometimes it's sexual somatic healing, going to a sexological body worker if there's some kind of sexual trauma. There's, I'd say, craniosacral therapy. That I actually had that done. It was actually kind of wild. I thought it was a bit fucking weird when she told me about it. But
you're going to be a craniosacral practitioner in 2 years.
Oh God, I hope not. But it was wild. I was like, wow, okay, this is quite impressive. So there are different modalities that you can use to allow yourself to feel your way out of the feelings. So you can
Cool.
think your way out of problems, and you can also feel your way out. And you need to have both.
Yeah, I think that's a really satisfactory answer for a lot of men. Okay, if I understand it, then I can figure it out. Structured process. I could do this.
It was it was definitely a masculine, very, very man answer.
Well, you're right. There's like being able to build structure around feeling processes is a really powerful thing to do. It stabilizes the entire experience and gives a degree of certainty to the unfolding of the process in the same way as ritual, rites of passage, ceremony. There's a structure to the intensity that makes it a lot easier to digest. So just to recap what it is that you were saying, so being able to identify and label the trigger point, like the thing that actually creates a cascade, and label it to be able to identify what it is, to practice feeling with the awareness that you are not any of the feelings that you're feeling, to remove your identity from those experiences. And lastly, seek out some sort of structured process through a facilitator or coach of some sort.
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible to engage in...
There was one more.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
There was one more. So thanks. So the trigger point, right? And being able to label it, being able to feel it and not identify with it. And then somatic healing. So allowing yourself like some kind of, by somatic, it's using your body to let the emotions go. Mm-hmm. And then also some kind of coaching or counseling or therapy that allows you to think new ways, rewire your brain differently. Mm-hmm. So there's sort of 4 things that go on there.
Beautiful. So somatic processing, engaging your body in some sort of psychosomatic release of an energy. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on whether you believe it is possible for a man to engage in this kind of authentic transformation on their own. If they have access to the tools and the techniques, can you do this by yourself, or do you need to find support, a coach, a community of some sort?
I tried doing it alone for quite a long time. You can get to a certain point just by reading books, sure, but unless you're going to live your entire life by yourself, which you're probably not going to, then it's best to do this kind of work in either in some form of group or some coaching relationship. And there needs to be both as well. I think there are some people who get caught up in like doing the next workshop, do landmark or Psi seminars or some other Tantra workshop or something else, and then they're constantly processing, but then they never integrate the learnings. So integration happens on your own. Just integration happens either with friends or on your own through meditation. So it's a balance between the two. So working on things yourself, but you can't do it all on your own. So go ask for help, get mentorship, get coaching, counseling, group therapy, men's groups. Do that type of work as well, and those two will complement one another. Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about men working with female practitioners or coaches to do this kind of work?
I think it's great, but you can't just rely on women to teach you how to be a man. So if you're relying on a woman to teach you how to be a man, even the most aware and integrated woman won't be able to teach you how to be a man because she's not a man. Same thing for a woman. I would never expect a woman to go to a man to learn how to be a woman. Even the most integrated and well-intentioned man can't truly teach a woman how to be a woman. So a woman can teach a man a whole ton that men can't. And then men can teach men things that a woman can't. So yeah, definitely go to a woman, learn how to be a man from a woman's perspective, feel it, learn those lessons, 100%. I listen to Alison Armstrong a ton. She's incredible. Absolutely love that woman. But also make sure that you get input and teaching and coaching from men as well. Basically, I'm kind of the mind, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
4 baskets. There's
4 baskets. The 4-step process to all the baskets.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ryan, for all of this information. I'm really thrilled to be chatting with you. And one of the things that I feel is of most value in any of these conversations is having some sort of follow-through action step that men can capitalize on. So you offered 4 really beautiful points here that I want to reiterate one more time, just for any of the listeners. Being able to identify and label any trigger points, engaging in somatic processing, using the body to actually transmute energy and feelings, being able to separate identity from your feelings, and engage in some sort of coaching, counseling, group work to engage in this type of transformative process. And if you're looking for some female inspiration, look up Alison Armstrong.
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So is there anything else that you want to offer to our listeners, to any men who are watching this, to give them any inspiration, motivation, any nuggets of wisdom, any other personal stories before we close out?
Personal nuggets. I'd say one nugget that I gained from today is make sure that you have your examples predetermined before going into an interview. I don't think I have too much, I guess, in the sense of knowledge. I guess I would need some kind of context to offer something like that. So I'll just leave it with what it is that you said. I guess for an offer, if guys are looking to tap into a bit more sexual and emotional self-mastery, you can reach out to me. You can find me at theintimatelyfestyle.com or on Facebook, Ryan Thomas TIL. That's my handle on Facebook. And I would say that that's about it.
Amazing. Well, it's been a pleasure to chat with you, Ryan. For those listeners out there, you can find me at deusfortier.com, Deus Fortier on Facebook, and across all the social media platforms. It's just my name. So thank you so much for joining me. You're doing good work. The world needs more of it. Keep it up, brother.
Thanks a lot.